We are going to get started. In this panel, you can see from the program, it's David Levy and Richard Vedder. They are both distinguished economists. I have to admit, I'm a social psychologist. I'm narrowly, parochially, informed about social psychology. I actually don't know that much about the sort of view from economics about the reproducibility crisis, and I am actually dying to hear this panel. Over to you.
Thank you for inviting me. Okay. Does it work? Oh, yeah, it works. Okay. Perhaps I should just put this on the board and then stop. That's all there is. Well, let's get better glasses. The important thing is, well, first it's Gordon Tullock. The other thing that's important is the date. It's 1966. So Gordon was talking about replication in 1966. And basically no one paid attention to it. And that there's a paper from which this is drawn that has the references and all, and some I don't know, technical or whatever stuff in it that if you want to write me, or it's on the website. So Gordon's point is just that if you know things are going to be checked, you're going to be more careful. This is really simple. And the simplicity is, I think, critical. Okay. Now, I was delighted our previous speaker was talked about positional temptation, because the argument I'm going to make, colleagues have made, is the temptation is sympathy. And it can be in multiple dimensions. It can be a sympathy for clients' desires. That's what some more technical work is. Sympathy for the world of the past self, what you and your friends have done in the past, and sympathy for a point of view. And so the foresight of having your work redone by people who are not sympathetic is important. Now, this has put us in opposition to the recent American Economic Association Code of Ethics, where temptation is purely financial. So you have to just, when you publish an article in an American Economic Association journal, you have a little questionnaire of who's given you money, and that sort of stuff. What groups do you belong to that are financially connected, and that sort of thing. They don't ask anything about sympathetic temptations. So we published something a while back, and we made a pain. I guess we're a pain in the necks because we put in our sympathetic conflicts of interest. So we take this point of view in these debates, and so the reader should know that. But this is very much a minority position, but I think it's important. It's obviously harder to measure than cash, but whatever. Okay. I'm going to assume that we're in a world of government by discussion, which is an idea of democracy that comes from John Stuart Mill. It shows up in John Rawls. And that means I'm not going to stand up here and pretend I'm king for a day. So there's no, here's what we do and the problem that will solve. I don't believe that for a second. I think that's inappropriate in a democracy. I think that what has to happen is for the polity to become aware of the critical importance of replication. And if that happens, things will change. The incentives will change. This, of course, assumes that the incentives are fairly simple. If the incentives were terribly complicated, that might not work. But if they're simple, they may work. So, okay, now, simple things. And so this is me and the Feigenbaum person is female, in case that counts for anything. We put forward some very simple considerations. The article is entitled Market for Irreproducible Econometrics, which is a little snarkier than we usually are. So we thought that the private benefits for publishing a replication article were small. The cost of replication activity is not small. And the world we were working in was basically only negative results are likely to be published. Okay, then you work that through the model, and you say, whoa, you're not going to give data to in that world to the cost. And so the implication we had was that little replication activity will be undertaken. Well, last year, a multi-authored monster piece in a policy review, Mueller-Longer et al. Came out and asked when replication occurred, and golly, simple incentives are predictive. I know for economists, that's like saying demand curves slope downward. Yeah, okay. But that's why if you don't have to be king for a day. You can simply, okay. And something that struck me from reading the Mueller-Longer et al. Paper is they start with Karl Popper, 59, Logic of Scientific Discovery. And what intrigued me was, what's the relationship between falsification and replication? And so that the paper is in some sense an attempt to answer that. Everybody knows, or at least everybody of my age knows, that Popper made the falsification principle critical to scientific progress. What may be less known, but it's easy to show, and there's references in the paper, that Popper's democratic views are integral to his work. And so we want to think about how replication functions in a democracy of science. And by a non-coincidence, one of the great economic theorists of democratic governance was Gordon Tullock. Gordon was also an avowed Popperian, which is so deep that he was working with the Popper manuscript when its working title was Logic of Scientific Inquiry. And there's, of course, this check this out and why the change. Again. So Gordon's association with Popper is way back. And so we want to think about replication as something like a free entry condition in the governance of science. So it brings another point of view into discussion. And here's where the debate we see between the democracy of science and the republic of science. Michael Polanyi, whose fate cheated out of a Nobel Prize in chemistry and is one of the great philosophers of the era, eloquently defended the republic of science. And in this defense, he cast doubt on the ability to routinely reproduce scientific results. And I think, well, that could very well be true under current resource conditions. But if we think it's important that these are they reproduce, resources can be moved. Okay, but that's, as I think, the great debate is between the republic of science and the democracy of science. Okay, now, what does economists have to do with this? And the question is, what does replication mean? And since we had a court case discussed, I'll talk about another court case. And the court case was, what does replication mean? And two very famous economists went to court. And what happened was Steve Levitt, who's very well known, said in print that John Lott's work was not replicable. John Lott took Steve Levitt to court. And Lott said, in econometrics, replicable means same model, same data, same technique, same everything. And Levitt said, we're talking about English, not econometrics. And so that in the English language community, it's a wider variety. Okay, and Levitt won. Okay. So, but the narrow definition has uses, and we'll see in a moment. Okay, now my little non-joke about somebody my age would think that Popper's important is that Popper's view is very much an eclipse. And the reason is the falsification principle is ambiguous. And when I was working up this, I finally got around to reading the text of his Logic of Scientific Discovery, which wasn't published until the late 70s and was not translated until, 2009. So, and this just quoting has been emphasized many times, probably by Duham. First, the difficulties associated with the empirical testing of theories involve not only the positive aspects of the question only, namely verification, but falsification also. The main reason is that the retrospective falsification of theoretical assumptions through the falsification of derived consequence, that is to say the modus tollens, affects all the deductive assumptions equally. And as a result, the decision as to which of these assumptions to regard as falsified and which to be upheld is always largely an arbitrary one. And that, what's now called the Duham-Quine position, that you're always testing conjunctions. We never know which one's gone wrong, and that's why falsification doesn't work. And so Popper's, and there's one citation, I think, on this because I got bored. Okay. All right, so now think about the narrow replication that Lot proposed. Everything is held constant. Everything. Thus, the doom problem goes away. There's no loose ends. So the paper is either replicated or is not. Okay, think, well, you just defined it away. Come on. Okay, think about a small change. Start from where we are, make a small change in any dimension. What happens? If the result changes by a small amount, well, we're in the center of the mathematical statistics of robustness. This is where robust statistics come in. And so we've turned the problem from a falsification to a replication and robustness one. Thank you.